Hello, welcome to my channel. I've been an F1 fan for 15, 20 years, 28 years now, old now. So I definitely have seen a lot of races. I've basically started to make a notebook diary of what everything is happening in the race, and I would like to discuss it with people, have their comments on my opinions, similar to like the Ted Kravitz notebook, which Sky Sports does, but I'd like to try and give it a bit more of an opinionated twist. This is the Mexican Grand Prix 2019 season review. I think it's also the 1015th race in Formula One. And overall, it was an okay race. I don't think it was a classic by any means, but there were certainly some standout performances, certain things to discuss also. It rained the night before, so the track was definitely a lot more raw. Some of the tyres I don't think were quite performing to the way the drivers were thinking they would do, and the same with the teams. There were some really long strategies, especially on the hard tyre, and we'll talk about Daniel Ricciardo's performance during this later on. Lewis Hamilton, of course, as we know, the winner of the race, and what a race it was by him. But yeah, I think prior to the race, we saw Bottas looking pretty cool with his shades on. We were really hoping that he might be able to challenge Hamilton for the championship, but I think we know really that it's a drawn-out conclusion that he'll win the championship now, and the fact that he hasn't won it in Mexico just means he'll win it in a race later on. But it's good that it's still lasting, gives us a glimmer of hope that maybe Hamilton won't win his sixth championship. But to be honest, I think he probably deserves it this season, so it's the right man's going to do it. But basically, yeah, I watched the race. I made notes and notes and notes of the action which is going on. Luckily, it was quite a good race this weekend. Qualifying wise, I don't know what you think, but it's probably right that Verstappen was penalised if you watch the onboard telemetry. And also from his head cam, you can see that he saw the yellow flag. And I think he's even admitted that he saw Bottas's car parked there. He still stayed full on the gas out of the last turn 17. And quite rightly, he was demoted. I think 3 places is probably a little bit lenient. And I've seen this quite a few times now. I think we see Red Bull pit lane wise, let's say doing a release when there's another car already going through. And if it's safety, for me, the penalty should be far more severe. Go on a 3-place grid drop to 4th position. Is it really the right sort of, I guess, impression to set on the other drivers? I don't know, but I'm happy to hear your opinions on that, so let me know. But also, I really think Verstappen could have had a shot of the win today. We can discuss this later, all around turn 1, but I think if he was in it, then maybe Hamilton wouldn't have won the race. So yeah, 4.3 kilometers. It was interesting to see the statistics that Leclerc and Vettel 7 to 11 in Leclerc's favour. So certainly a stat that Vettel won't be very fond of. He likes stats, so you can imagine that he's not going to want this one to be like that too much longer. And all of the front runners starting on the medium tyres. I think you had to go down to probably, I think it was the McLarens which started on the softer compound, the Red Bull tyre, and then from that I think we had quite a few hard starters, especially the Renaults. But yeah, let's talk about lap 1 then. So probably the first thing to talk about is Vettel going to the left slightly on Hamilton, pushing Hamilton onto the grass. It was close. I think Vettel could have probably given a little bit more room. He definitely would have known he was there. Stewards investigated, no action. Would I have given a penalty? Probably not. I think the cars are at a very high speed there. The mirrors are small. And yeah, I'm trying to put in the favour of less penalties anyway, but it could have gone either way, I think. He definitely could have left more room. From then, we had the accident now. We're talking Verstappen. So I think Verstappen ran a little bit wide. I think he just lost the back end slightly, slid into Hamilton. And that made Hamilton's car slightly unstable. It was a very, very small contact. Then Hamilton's car veered a little bit to the right. That pushed Verstappen off onto the grass, and from then on, it looks like through that, it just pretty much ruined his race. But we can talk about that a little bit later on as well. And then really, I think because Hamilton had then fallen down the field, he had to cut the turn 3, turn 4. from then on, he was already past the McLarens, I think, pretty much by about lap 3 from my notes. I think he overtook Sainz on lap 3. Bottas at this point was still behind Norris. I think he was in something like 7th position. And it took him until lap 6 or lap 7 to actually overtake Sainz. So I think he got past Norris earlier on from that. But that's really the difference, I think, between Hamilton and Bottas. Hamilton just gets it done within a couple of laps. Bottas, he just doesn't seem to have that lethal instinct, which he's always been lacking in the championship, and that's why he's trailing Hamilton by 70 odd points. So yeah, for me that was probably one of the most disappointing parts. It just takes too long to get going. Hamilton just sees the gap and goes for it, whereas Bottas just doesn't. And then we saw the local hero Perez, pretty good race by him. I think he overtook Kvyat on lap 11. And then they started to see a bit more high degradation. I think good stand-up performance by Albon, at least in the first half of the race. I think he was in the DRS zone of Vettel for quite long periods, sort of lap 10, lap 14, 15, which was pretty good. And then we had Perez starting to then catch Norris. And at that point, Norris pitted, and that's really where his race ended. It looks like they didn't connect one of the wheel nuts properly. He was released. He was then told to stop. The mechanics went to go and get the car. And then they rolled him back to the pits again, secured the tyre, and off he went. And I think they had a radio message saying, look, we want to see what you can do, and prove to them on the hard tyre it could have been a great result. In the end, they DNF'd, I think, about 10 laps before the end, maybe just to save the engine, save the parts. They've still got the right tyre data they might need. But I think we probably can talk about McLaren now for a little bit. Sainz was really high running for the start of the race. I think he was running on the soft compound tyre because he was on the McLarens, pitted onto the mediums, and after that he just fell down and down the field. Don't even know where he ended up in the end, but definitely not in the points. So yeah, just not a good race for McLaren at all. I think they really were hoping this was going to be one of their stronger areas. I think the high altitude conditions helps the Renault engine, but it just wasn't to be. So probably now talking about Ferrari and the strategy of the teams after we've gone through the first few laps. I think, well, Hamilton pitted first, so going on to the hard tyres, and you're probably thinking, does he have to pit again? And in the end he didn't, and that's pretty much what won him the race. He was able to do something like, must have been 40 plus laps on those tyres. Ricciardo was the big, I guess, benchmark for the other teams. He was, I think, 50 laps he was able to do in his first stint until he swapped tyres. But yeah, overall it really was around that strategy. The others pitted a lot later than that. They were still losing, obviously, a certain amount of time than what Hamilton was losing, going from the mediums onto the hards. But yeah, in the end, they came out behind Hamilton. So I think overall for at least Mercedes, finishing first and third, Bottas was never really able to get close to Vettel, which is a shame. Again, he needed it for the championship. He needed to try and get past Vettel to close the gap, maybe try and get Hamilton. But again, he just doesn't have that instinct. They pitted, and then basically, okay, he pulled in the gap to Vettel, but he was never really able to get close enough. I think he had DRS zone a few times, but never actually tried a manoeuvre. Vettel never had to really go defensive. Leclerc was one of the first to stop, so from Ferrari's point of view, they ran Vettel longer. I really thought Vettel was going to win the race, or at least come. I think actually I predicted him in second in the end, but it was pretty close. I'm just trying to go back to where I was. Yeah, I had a prediction on lap 47 for Bottas to win, Vettel to come second, Hamilton to come third. I think at that point Bottas was on the freshest of the compounds tyres, and the same with Vettel, but he seemed to be going a lot faster at that point. But then around sort of lap 60, they all started to have the same sort of times. Leclerc was really the big surprise, able to come back on the freshest tyres, doing a two-stop strategy. I think the only thing that I was thinking of is, could he have gone on to the soft tyres? But I think he still had around 25 odd laps to go, and that was probably a bit too tight for the soft tyres. But yeah, going for a medium hard just sort of gave you the impression that he maybe could have had a different strategy that could have influenced things slightly there. And yeah, from that it was a bit of a procession really, but it was good to see each car's 2 seconds apart. That really did help things, I think, from at least a fan point of view for the Mexican fans. At least they saw the cars in the same shot, but really just having the 2 second gaps each time and not really getting any faster for that. Red Bull, obviously, really disappointing time for them. Albon, I actually think had quite a strong race, but I would have compared it with Verstappen because of his problems. I think Albon was running in third during the early part of the race. Him and Leclerc pitted at pretty much the same time. And after that, I think Albon lost quite a bit of time after his pit stop. I think he went to about 10 seconds behind Leclerc, and it was only about 5 or 6 seconds before he pitted. And that's pretty much where the gap stayed during the whole of the rest of the race, ending up in 5th position. Verstappen clawed his way back through the field, ended up in 6th, but it was a scrappy race for him. Can't remember the detail now, but he must have hit a couple of people with his front wing. But in the end, I think after his first lap problems, 6th would have been the best he could have got. Looking at Renault, going back to Daniel Ricciardo, really strong race from him. Really battling with the Racing Point. I'm going to say Force India for a second, but the Racing Point of Sergio Perez. I mean, I'm happy for Perez. It was his home race, which is great. I think they ended up must have been 7th position behind Verstappen and Ricciardo in 8th. But yeah, Ricciardo had a few lunges, especially into turn 1, I think near the end of the race. Something like lap 62 or lap 63. But overall, he wasn't quite able to do it. But considering the problems that Renault have had with their brake bias issues, having that illegally, I think they're still going to appeal it, but at the moment it's deemed illegal. Their slightly automated system for the brake bias settings. It's not something that they can go on for at the moment. So they've had to reset that setting, but in the end 8th. I think the last lap, I believe Kvyat hit Hulkenberg, so that puts Hulkenberg out of the points at this moment of recording the video. I don't know if Kvyat's going to get a penalty for it. He probably should do. Hulkenberg had the corner. Kvyat was his nose was on the rear tyres of Hulkenberg. It really wasn't any idea of overtaking, but it's the last lap, and to be fair, we should probably be trying to encourage those sort of manoeuvres, but not when it's going to take the other driver out of the race. Probably thinking about Toro Rosso in general, pretty quiet race for them, running in the sort of 10th, 11th, 12th, where they probably have been all season. Alfa Romeo, nowhere. Kimi won't be happy. Haas, absolutely nowhere. I think Williams got their best recording of the season when Kubica and Russell were fighting each other, which was probably... I'm not sure if the team really want this. Kubica, obviously, qualifying-wise, he was about a second behind Russell this weekend. Race-wise, he seemed to have about the same pace. He's always got a point to prove. The relationship looks like it's gone at the moment. But yeah, I think it's a difficult one, really. At least they got some camera time for their sponsors. I think they're going to have a new title sponsor, at least a renewal of the one they've currently got. So we'll have to see how that progresses. And still working on next year's car. Giovinazzi, further the Alfa Romeo, just going back to him. I think we all saw the pit stop where the right rear wasn't on properly. They lowered the jack, the car collapsed, had to raise it again. Doesn't look like they've got the right pit stop safety protocols in place, probably similar to McLaren's, but at least McLaren, I think it was at least temporarily on. So we'll see. I think radio messages, it was quite typical of Lewis to doubt the team's strategy, as we see recently. I really don't understand it. The guy has won so many races with Mercedes, and I know it's good to have your own mind in this sort of thing, but I think if the team are asking you to do something like this, then you go with it, or at least try and say it in a more positive way. But it worked in the end for him. Obviously, he said a big thank you to the team at the end. And also, I think when it got to around the last 10 laps, Mercedes gave him the sort of qualifying performance from the Mercedes engine. Vettel was getting a 10th or a 10th closer, but as soon as Mercedes changed their engine settings, he started to do something like 1 minute 19.6, and at that point Vettel could only match it and not get any closer. And I'm sure Bottas was also running the same similar engine mode. We didn't hear that team radio, but probably quite similar. The only thing I was going to sort of suggest from Red Bull's point of view, I think Albon had about a 39-second gap to Verstappen to try and set fastest lap. I would have brought him in, put him on soft tyres, or even medium tyres. Probably would have been able to be good enough. Do a fast lap, get the extra point for Red Bull, but obviously maybe constructors-wise, they just see it as we won't do this, but I think it's still open with Ferrari. I've not got the point system in front of me right now, but I think every point should matter still. I think it's a note to say that it's great for the race engineer. I think Hamilton's race engineer, Bonington, is in hospital at the moment, so it's great that they've been able to win that race. They dedicated the win to him on the radio, which is obviously great to see from a Mercedes point of view. And yeah, that was pretty much it really. It was always building to be a great finish, but it just never really happened. We'll have to see what the next race brings. I'm really hoping Bottas can at least win a couple of the races near the end, put him on good form for the latter half of the season. Vettel, Leclerc, I think we'll have to see how that relationship develops. It appears that obviously they split their strategies this weekend. I don't think Leclerc will be too happy, especially not being on the podium, considering that he effectively started on pole after Verstappen's reduction in places. But yeah, that's pretty much everything from me. I think I've gone through all of the notes which I could have gone through. So yeah, I'm really happy to hear your sort of thoughts and comments. First time doing the video, so I'll try and do a few different features. A couple of special guests will try and come on. But yeah, looking forward to hearing your comments, and I wish everyone a great week. Thanks. Goodbye.